Army Sergeant Roy E. Bumgarner, Jr. was born in the city of Hickory, North Carolina in the year 1930. Bumgarner, also known as the Bummer, would go on to become a reported super soldier, as well as becoming one of the most monstrous and controversial figures of the United States and Vietnam conflict. Nearly no information exists of Bumgarner's early life. Essentially all information available about Bumgarner's life pertains to his military career exploits. Bumgarner spent the first 10 years of his military career in the United States Marine Corps while serving the remainder of his military career in the United States Army. The Bummer fought in multiple conflicts across Asia during his military career: the Chinese Civil War, the repression of the Huk Rebellion in the Philippines, the Korean War, and ultimately arriving and serving in Vietnam. However, Bumgarner's controversial behavior in the military did not start in Vietnam. His 10 years in the United States Marine Corps were very problematic, with Bumgarner being confined in California's Camp Pendleton, being confined in the Philippines, as well as being confined in the nation of Japan for his unsuitable behavior in the military. Bumgarner's time in the Army was also plagued with trouble. Army records indicate Bumgarner pled guilty to multiple assaults and disorderly conduct. Now, before we analyze Bumgarner and his squad's reputed body counts, it is best to understand the how and why behind the United States' efforts to monitor enemy casualties during the Vietnam War. The United States' principal tactic in Vietnam was their search and destroy missions. Search and destroy is a term coined in 1965 to describe operations aimed at flushing the Viet Cong out of hiding. The body count was the measuring stick of the success of these search and destroy missions. From the early stages of the Vietnam War, it was clear the goal of the United States was not to conquer North Vietnam, but rather ensure the survival of the South Vietnamese government. To conquer North Vietnam would be an extremely daunting task and would surely cause China to intervene in the Vietnam War. The body count was the most significant measure of progress for the United States in Vietnam. Body counts were also used as a means of showing that the United States was quote-unquote winning the war, as well as keeping the morale of the United States military and the morale of the United States citizens high. The high pressure to produce these body counts was placed on the United States military and was pushed from the top down. Competitions were held between units for the highest number of confirmed kills, and Roy Bumgarner was as competitive as any man when it came to increasing the body count of him and his unit. Now, while most portrayals of United States soldiers in Vietnam show them as counting the days until their tours of duty were finished, anxious to survive and return home, it is very safe to assume that was not the method of operation for Roy Bumgarner. Bumgarner spent 7 years serving in Vietnam, splitting his time between the 1st Air Cavalry Division and the 173rd Airborne Brigade. It was this time in Vietnam where the Bummer amassed his reputation of being a prolific and cold-blooded killer who competitively tried day in and day out to raise his own personal body count. By the late 1960s, early 1970s, Bumgarner was said to have accumulated over 1,500 confirmed kills in his personal body count. And that number did not come from Bumgarner himself, but rather a former commander in the United States Army. It is reported that there were times when Bumgarner and his 6-man Wildcat team logged more kills than the rest of his 500-man battalion. While it is safe to say that Bumgarner was indeed a quote-unquote super soldier and very effective at racking up enemy kills, it also must be noted that the Bummer's high body count numbers may have been exaggerated. As mentioned before, the United States military were obsessed with body counts during the Vietnam War. Army and Marine officers knew that promotions of rank were largely based on confirmed kills. The need to produce high body counts resulted in massive fraud, with body counts sometimes being doubled or even tripled by United States commanders, as well as innocent civilians being killed and marked on records as being Viet Cong. When discussing Roy Bumgarner's confirmed kill numbers, an overlying fact was that the Bummer had committed countless war crimes by killing non-combatants, innocent Vietnamese men, women, and children. Bumgarner was reported by even his own men to have killed many unarmed non-combatants. then falsifying the justification for these killings by planting weapons and other Viet Cong supplies on the bodies. Army Private Arthur Williams is quoted as saying, "I've got nothing against Sergeant Bumgarner, except this mad urge to kill. I don't want him to get in trouble, but I can't know of what is happening and say nothing. More people will be killed." This sworn statement by Private Arthur Williams was made to an investigating Army Lieutenant Colonel, who then dropped his investigation and did absolutely nothing about the murderous killmonger that was Roy E. Bumgarner. However, on the morning of February 25, 1969, in the Binh Dinh province of Vietnam, Bumgarner led a 5-man reconnaissance team and led them to a rolling landscape of rice paddies. It was on this journey that the team encountered an irrigation worker and 2 teenage boys tending to ducklings. These 3 Vietnamese civilians carried no weapons, only simple tools. Bumgarner detained the 3, marched them to a secluded spot in the jungle, where he and one of his men opened fire, killing the 3 civilians. Efforts were made to conceal the true identity of these men. Their belongings were stolen and hidden, and Bumgarner had them mutilated beyond recognition with a hand grenade. Afterwards, Bumgarner reported the 3 dead Vietnamese as enemy fighters killed in action. This series of events led to Bumgarner being military court-martialed for premeditated murder. Bumgarner was in fact found guilty and convicted for his crimes. However, the charge was lessened to manslaughter, and Bumgarner never served any time of confinement. Instead, Bumgarner was served a fine of $97 a month for 6 months and demoted of his rank. He remained in Vietnam, and it was approximately 6 months after being found guilty that Bumgarner re-enlisted for another tour of duty in the Army to further indulge in his love of killing. Bumgarner was welcomed right back into the United States Army with open arms, and Bumgarner remained in the United States Army until his retirement in 1981, seemingly never receiving justice for his countless war crimes. Army Sergeant Roy E. Bumgarner Jr. passed away in the year 2005 peacefully in the same city he was born. This marked the end of a life that had undoubtedly brought an abundance of death and destruction to the battlefields he was assigned to. The Army Sergeant's final resting place is the Arlington National Cemetery in Arlington, Virginia. If you enjoyed this video, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for future content. Was Roy E. Bumgarner Jr. a monster, or just a soldier fulfilling his duty? Let's discuss it in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching. Hodor!